When I list a house, I always have a conversation with the seller about the seller's disclosure. Obviously, that is the document they have to fill out. They're asked all kinds of questions, but the conversation has to do with, well, how much do I have to disclose? And my answer is always everything you can think of: disclose, disclose, disclose. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about why disclosure is just as important for a seller as it is for a buyer. Now, clearly, it's beneficial to a buyer. If the buyer reads the disclosure and discovers that there was a roof leak, or that the heat was last replaced 32 years ago, or that water comes into the basement, then obviously they have important information that they need to consider when they are putting together an offer, or even if that makes them decide not to put in an offer. So disclosure is obviously good for the buyer. But why is it good for the seller? Well, the first thing is that anything a seller does disclose, the buyer can't really come back and ask for a repair or a fix. I mean, the buyer can, but let's just say the buyer has much less of a leg to stand on if the seller disclosed that. The concept is, look, Mr. Buyer, you put your offer on knowing full well about that problem because I disclosed it. So now, just because the inspector points it out, you want me to fix it or give you a credit? No, you knew that going in. You signed the seller's disclosure. So it reduces the likelihood that a seller will have to make repairs or give a credit. Additionally, when a seller discloses, it lessens the likelihood that in the future, after the buyer moves into the house, that the buyer's going to come back and sue the seller and say, none of these things were disclosed. I don't believe that the seller didn't know about these things, and that can be a lawsuit. Nobody wants that. The third reason that disclosure is good for sellers is it puts forth a sense of honesty and good faith, that the seller isn't hiding anything, that the seller doesn't feel right conveying a property with problems that are not going to be made clear to the buyer. So I think that it goes a long way to creating good faith in a transaction, and having that can really help, especially if there are any bumps or surprises along the way. So there will always be people who say, well, if I disclose everything, it's not a new house. It makes my property look like it has all kinds of problems. I don't want to draw attention to that. So can't I just gloss over a few of the minor things, or just kind of not mention a few of the things? And my answer is still no. Why? Because inevitably, whether it's through an inspection or even worse, after the buyers buy the house and discover these problems that you didn't disclose, we're back to the same thing: a lawsuit or a transaction in which the buyer is going to think you weren't really honest and forthright, and likely ask you to repair something or give a credit. So you kind of wind up right back in the same place. So I think it's better to put your cards on the table, be transparent, don't hide anything, and the transaction will go much more smoothly, and there will be many fewer surprises.